Hello everyone. So in this video, I thought let us talk about the problem of not keeping Jira issues up to date. Now this happens with me quite regularly, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to it. Let us say you have built a really nice system in Jira, and some kind of a process, or maybe you have no process. Maybe you just are using Jira as it is in its purest form. Now, when it comes to delivery, when it comes to using Jira for doing some kind of issue tracking, project management, there is always a need to know what is happening. Let us say you have 10 epics that you want to deliver in a specific quarter, or maybe in the next couple of months, maybe in a specific release, something like that. So basically, you have identified some work to be delivered. Now, those 10, 20 epics will be, of course, broken down into stories, right? That is how things are. And those stories are then assigned to sprints or added to those sprints, or at least in a way, when you do your sprint planning. I'm talking about, of course, when you're following Scrum, so that I can give you some background. So let us say you have a few sprints that you have planned, like maybe current sprint or maybe upcoming sprint, or at least the next couple of sprints, and you have you have done some planning. And in Jira, of course, when you are making a plan, I'm talking about in the beginning when you are a project manager, you start creating a plan. Let us say you're not really using advanced roadmap, you're just using Jira normal project, and you have like a roadmap. So you have done your planning where you have roadmap view of all the epics, or maybe you have done some further breakup into stories. Now, when it comes to those stories, of course, those stories may or may not have subtasks. Usually there are subtasks. People always break it down further. And under a sprint, you of course may want to have stories and maybe stories for testing. Maybe you have test cases that you want to execute. So in Jira, you will end up with a lot of issues, right? Now let us take an example of the workflow for an epic. Now, an epic workflow can be very simple: to do, in progress, done, right? It's a very simple workflow, simplified workflow with three states. But usually people want to do a bit more. They want to have something like, okay, we want to start the work, then in progress, then we want to have testing, or within testing they also want to do maybe further breakup of those testing phases. Then of course review, and then done. And of course I'm just talking about those statuses. Usually there is like a flow, like some flow. And similarly for a story, again there can be a workflow. And usually when people are starting to use Jira, they are interested. And to be honest, in a way I should say, the main reason that people want to use Jira is of course the customizations, and workflow is like one big aspect of customizations in Jira. So let us do a quick recap. So we have epic, we have stories, we have task, we have subtask, we can have test cases, we have bugs. Yeah, I didn't really mention bugs. And each and every issue type will have maybe its own workflow, which usually is the case, because that is how things are. And when it comes to actually working, like starting the work, let us say you have done this planning, you have defined your model, like way of working in Jira, and you have also identified different fields that need to be filled in. So it can actually get very complex. And if you are delivering, if your objective is to collaborate, your objective is to plan the work in Jira, at the same time you want to track the progress, like what is happening with my sprints. At any given stage, your stakeholders, your program managers, your release managers, your product managers, they want to know at the epic level what is happening. They want to know how many how many stories are released, how many stories are released on UAT, and they are doing testing, and how many bugs are reported on UAT. Then of course they have to go live, and before they can go live, they have to fix all these critical bugs. So Jira can actually store a lot of information, and that is how things are. That is how Jira configurations designed. So you basically design each and everything that you want to do or you expect from the tool. But the main problem that usually people forget when they're designing this system is they don't really or they miss the human element. So if you are working in a very tight schedule environment, like aggressive environment, like you have a sprint where you want to make sure that you deliver everything in the sprint, and you make sure that, and you want to make sure that, let us say you're writing code. So your developers are more focused on writing code. In that case, it can actually get very challenging to keep Jira up to date. And I'm talking about cases where you have hundreds of items that you have to update. So I started with 20 epics. Then, of course, you will break it down into maybe 200 stories, 200 test cases, or maybe more. So you can actually have hundreds or maybe thousands of issues to update, and not just, and you can do the math, right? So you have one epic with 3 statuses, 20 epics with, again, 3 statuses. You have so many fields to update, and you have similar statuses for stories and bugs. So someone has to go to Jira and click on the update button and make sure whenever you move from one status to another status, there might be a transition screen with more fields to fill in. So what I wanted to talk about in this video is that in case you're trying to roll out Jira in your organization, try to find a balance between, and there are a lot of factors. If you're working in a corporate, big organization, by design, they are very bureaucratic and they want to track each and everything. And it is probably okay to have like this restrictive, complex design in Jira. But at the same time, also think about the actual users, developers, testers, Scrum Masters, because it will be like their life could be, you don't really want them to hate their job, right? Because if I'm a developer, I've done my work all day, but I don't really want to spend like half an hour updating my Jira issues. So there is no like right or wrong way of doing it. Like when it comes to level of complexity or process that you create in Jira, you just have to find out yourself. At the same time, I've mentioned this many times before. Your first priority should be to keep things very simple, like as simple as you can, as simple as you could, based on your situation in your organization. If you can manage with 3 statuses to do in progress done, that is wonderful. And ask yourself over and over again, whenever you are trying to ask your Jira administrator, don't do it yourself. Don't really give your project admins Jira admin rights, because they will create without thinking about the future, without thinking about the state of Jira configurations after 6 years. They will create unlimited statuses. They will create fields. So always keep it very simple, and be a bit. If you're in that position where you control configurations in Jira, you have to be strict. You have to be rigid. You have to be someone who has some authority, because of course, without authority, without some leadership role, you will get pushed, and that is how things are. So in a big organization, there is a tendency usually to complex these configurations. In small organizations, it is again not always desirable to have like complicated workflows with hundreds of fields to fill in. But at the same time, small companies, when they start using Jira, or maybe when they map their processes in Jira, usually a small company will become, or they aim to become like a big company, or at least they want to scale up or they want to grow. So this is something that you have to be careful from the very beginning. If you are doing things in a very simple way in Jira, and if you are able to deliver on time, then great. And usually people don't really ask themselves, or people don't really look at the outcome. They try to blame the tool. They try to, in a way, because it happens a lot. If I am, let us say, a Scrum Master, and I have to make sure that in my sprint, everything is up to date, because management will look at those sprint reports. Management will look at all the stories that I'm trying to deliver in my 3 or 4 epics. So it is my responsibility. And training is, of course, one part of it, like training or mentorship, or you should actually give your developers time to update their Jira issues. And if you have a good working culture, if you are nice to each other, if you are just asking them nicely that, can you please update your Jira issue end of the day when you're done with your work, and especially when you're doing time tracking. This time tracking thing is of course very annoying, but unfortunately we have to do it. There's no like real alternative, especially in those cases where you're working for someone else. For example, if I'm working for a client and I'm basically doing some work for them. So if I'm doing some work for them, they are paying me for my uh, for my number of hours or number of days. I have to log my time somewhere, right? And usually in companies, people are expected to submit their timesheets if they have to. I mean, not always, but if they have to, then it has to be usually the way it works when it comes to timesheets or updates. Do it regularly. Do it as whenever you can. And there are ways to, of course, automate. I'm not really talking about automating like timesheet submission or making sure that you have written a script to update something in Jira. I'm talking about finding a balance where if you don't really need to update time, or if you don't really want people to log their time, then if there is no value, if you're not really doing any billable work, then don't do it. Just focus on the delivery. Just focus on the happiness of your developers or your team members. And this is something that I'm telling, because I'm not really a Scrum. I don't really call myself as a Scrum Master or a project manager. But fortunately for me, for the kind of work I do, because Jira is always in the center. Whenever I'm working with teams, they ask me these questions about how can I make my life easier when it comes to updating things in Jira. Of course, there are a lot of things that we can do. For example, some people just want to bulk upload something in Jira, which of course we can do, but bulk updating using a CSV file is not really always possible for non-administrators. So you have to of course find ways to do it. But apart from of course configuring smart commits and those workflow triggers, which I believe is a must-have, you should always. I mean, if you're doing coding and if your code repository is connected to Jira, then that is what you should do for sure. And finally, I would say that if you are in a situation where if you're looking at a report, and I'm talking about this, this is probably like a blunt root statement, but you should definitely trust your system and don't ask people to send you Excel sheets. For example, if you are looking at, let us say you are in a good position in your organization, you control the budget, and you want to know out of your 100 epics, how many epics are delivered. So just look at your dashboard, and if the dashboard says that yes, out of those 20 epics or out of those 100 epics, 20 are delivered, 50 are in progress, then trust it. Don't really ask people to send you Excel sheets, because that is where problem starts. You want people to use Jira, but at the same time, you also want them to give you an Excel sheet with a list of all the epics that they have worked on, because I see it a lot where people just have an Excel sheet with Jira issues, epics or stories, whatever, and they update the status in the Excel sheet because it is of course simpler, but they don't really match it with the data in Jira. So don't really keep status in multiple places. If you are using Jira for your planning, tracking, then make sure or encourage people to just update their Jira issues. And that is it. Don't really ask them to update it in 2 different places or 3 different places. And the moment you start creating an Excel sheet, nothing against Excel sheet should be used. Excel sheets are great. And I do a lot of work in Excel sheet, by the way. But at the same time, don't really mix and match things. Don't really try to create a presentation with data coming from Jira. You should simply just put a screenshot or maybe look at your dashboard, create your dashboards in a way so that you can simply grab a screenshot, paste it somewhere in your presentations. Try to pull data from Jira automatically. For example, if you are let us say very heavily Microsoft based, I'm sure people are doing it. People do it anyways using other tools like Power BI. But if you have, let us say, some reporting in Excel or maybe PowerPoint, then pull data from Jira using APIs, use VBA scripting, and then if you have to send a report every day, don't manually go to Jira and copy and paste. So I'm making this video because I see it a lot where using Jira itself is complex. Keeping it up to date is again even more difficult. And on top of that, people use Excel sheets. People actually create emails, like they draft emails every day, and they look at Jira, they look at Excel sheet, and of course there is confusion. So try to keep Jira simple if you can. And if you cannot really do that, I know there are cases where you have to you need some bureaucracy in Jira, which is fine. That is how things are. But in that case, of course, you have to improve the working culture, give your employees, your developers time to update. Whenever you're doing some estimation, try to keep some buffer. It may be just 15 minutes of their time, and do it regularly. If you wait for end of the month, then it won't happen. It won't reflect what is the reality. All right. Long video, I know, but I just felt like talking, and I hope I have given you some ideas, and just wanted to share my views on this. All right, that is it. Bye bye.